puse a correr porque no me acordé la hora.
¿Cómo estás? Yo no te escucho. Ahí sí te escucho.
Estaba conectándose a internet. ¿Cómo estás, Martín?
Bien, ¿y tú cómo estás?
Bien. Molestamos con algunas cositas técnicas de esta nueva presentación del sistema.
Dale, no te preocupes. Pero creo que esperamos a Silvana.
A Silvana, exacto.
Ya, esperemos a Silvana, no pasa nada.
Bueno, gracias.
Dale, no te preocupes, esperamos.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure for us from Olare to welcome you all to this significant event, something that concerns us all, a problem for which we are looking for solutions. So in 30 seconds, I'll be telling you a little bit about this meeting today. Last year, we started discussing with other lads the importance and the relevance of this topic, the importance of losses in the region, trying to find the possibility or the resources to look for a diagnosis, best practices, solutions, and try to offer different options to address this issue. It has different components, of course, physical components, economic components of electricity, and also with very important social components. So during those exchanges, we worked together with the IDB, and we decided to organize a meeting to highlight this topic. So we started exchanging ideas, trying to design and prepare this meeting. And also, as shown on the clip, apart from of the report by the ITB, something we're very grateful to, we're going to be listening to the experience of different companies and the academia, how to address this issue of different perspectives. So without further ado, then I would like to give the floor to the Executive Secretary of the Latin American Energy Organization, Andrés Rebolledo. Please, Andrés, the floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Fitzgerald, for your introduction. First thing I would like to highlight, then, it's this joint effort to organize this meeting that in a way shows these are a cooperation example between different organizations, companies, the academia, all these organizations that are invited to be part of today's meeting. We, as the Latin American Energy Organization, we have tried to work under this modality in the region, and we believe that this is the right way to make progress, as Fitzgerald was saying, to diagnose the situation, try to find solutions. So first of all, I would like to thank all the organizations represented by all the participants, Ariel, Alexandra, Rodrigo, and all the others, all those playing a role today, and the companies and organizations. Everything from the starting point of the report by the ITB. Secondly, I would like to highlight the importance of this topic. It's something that we often talk about in the context of this transformation that our energy sector is undergoing, especially the electricity sector. What happens in the sector where electrons are transported, where we assess the user's perspective on the performance on the electricity sectors, those connected to distribution. Now we need to focus on this specific area, on the user, the one that is getting the electricity. We need to concentrate on this last segment and to work on losses. We believe it's very important, especially in this transformation that we are undergoing. Of course, that it is a systemic topic, something that involves different aspects, technical, social, from the investment standpoint, and also connected to the quality of the service provided. And apart from all this, not only when it comes to resources and energy resources, but it's also connected to institutionality of all this, to all the economic and social aspects. In some countries in the region, the private sector is in control of this sector. In other countries, it's the other way around. It's 100% controlled by the public sector. So we have a little bit of everything. So solutions then need to take all these realities into account. They should be tailored to the specific realities of these countries. That's why that sitting together, listening to other countries' experiences, being able to exchange ideas and learning from each other, that is part of our mission, right? To share best practices, to exchange experiences, always taking into account the diverse realities that we have all over the region. And lastly, just to provide more information about this topic, I think it's interesting. In this first meeting, I would like to say, this is included in the report, that losses, electricity losses in the sector reach almost 15% of the annual offer in the region. And that is the addition of the whole region's production, at least for 2024, associated to wind and sun and solar energy. That is to say, what we lose represents exactly the same amount of all the energy produced in solar and wind energy. Just for you to have an idea of this. Of course, that we have a whole diversity of situations in the region, but of the 27 countries that are members of OLADE, 18 are above average. So we have an important reality that we need to take into account, and we need to make an extra effort and focus on diagnosis and solutions to this specific problem. And the last piece of data I would like to share, this 15% is almost double of what happens in the OECD. So that is a clear evidence of the important significance of the problem in the region. At OLADE, one of the things that we have been promoting is trying to find the political will to make progress in different areas. And that has been expressed or translated into targets. and we have been working with this, with the ITB in renewable energy. Last year, we defined a target in energy efficiency. This year, we have some new targets that we're going to be sharing with our ministers. Maybe we can think of a target in this specific context. That could be something interesting to do. Okay, so this is just an idea that may be useful to you. So basically, what we do with this is to try to promote an incentive, in a way, the political willingness to work with this. So thank you very much, everyone, for being today with us. And I would like to especially thank all those that are here today participating in this presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Andres. So now, Alessandra Manal, Executive Secretary of ADELAT, the floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. I will speak in Portuguese so that we can share this voice in the region. First of all, I would like to thank all the participants, the panelists, all those that are here today talking about this topic that is so important, basically to talk about losses in South America and the Caribbean. If you don't know me, I'm Alessandra. I'm the Executive President of ADELAT. That is the Energy Distributors Agency in Latin America. And our purpose here is to promote knowledge exchange and also best practices between different distributors in Latin America, basically helping them to go this energy transformation. We have carried out several studies connected to electromobility, quality, resilience, digitalization, synergies between telecommunication companies and distribution companies, among others. We have 23 members. Most of them are distribution companies, but we also have 2 associations. We have 2 from Argentina and 1 from Chile. We represent 9 Latin American countries: Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Peru. This is just our first webinar that we are jointly organizing with OLADE and IDB. My colleagues mentioned some aspects about this and how we created, or how we had that idea of creating this webinar. But this is part of an initiative by OLADE and ADELAT. So this is part of the non-technical losses in Latin America and the Caribbean. We know about the work carried out by IDB. That is a very complete report. And the idea would be to start in the webinar with a presentation by the IDB. And from that point, then, we're going to be developing a manual for best practices on how to address this topic of losses in Latin America and the Caribbean. As Andres Rebolledo mentioned, this is part of a problem, a serious problem, I would say, because it ends up using resources, economic resources of distribution companies, instead of using those resources for other projects that could be used for an energy transition that we know is very necessary. So losses have different causes that we're going to be discussing today, but it's key that we are together here, that we combine the best practices in order to have a better control of this challenge. So today we're going to have a presentation by the IDB, and moderation will be by Rodrigo Paulos of the University of Chile. And with that, we're going to be sharing experience from different ADELAT associates. We're going to have participants from Costa Rica, Guatemala, Argentina. We're going to have people from Brazil, and also a presentation by ICAP, that is a research institute from Dominican Republic. So Aldo, the president of the board of ADELAT, will be presenting about the case in Rio. And I was born in Rio de Janeiro. That is a state facing several challenges when it comes to non-technical losses. So then, Fitzgerald, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Alexandra, for your words. So both Andres and Alessandra have told us about the main topic of today's presentation. So now let's move on and let's see this presentation by IDB. So these are the people in charge, Ariel Shepes and Raúl Jiménez, that is with us today. So Ariel Shepes Garcia is the principal economic advisor of IDB. In the past, he works as a manager of energy and infrastructure sector, as a chief of the energy department in IDB. Before joining the bank, he was a senior economist of energy in the World Bank, and as an economic planning director in EMEX in Mexico. Also, he worked in the Secretaría de Hacienda in Mexico. Also, he has taught in la Universidad Autónoma de Mexico. He has also published several papers connected to infrastructure, energy, regulation, economic finance, and also a book on energy consumption in the different households in Latin America and the Caribbean has been published in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Has a PhD in economy by the Colegio de Mexico. He also was awarded an award in economy. Raúl Jiménez, he's an economist in the fiction division, where he specializes in energy and infrastructure projects. Before that, he was a researcher in the infrastructure department in IDB. He's interested in infrastructure, economic development, and impact evolution. He has published several reports on policies, also several papers in different journalists. He has a PhD in la Universidad de Roma. He has a master's degree in econometry in the University Torquato Di Tella in Argentina. So now, Ariel and Raúl, the floor is yours, and now you can tell us more in the presentation. Thank you very much, Fitzgerald, and thank you, Andres and Alessandra. It's a pleasure to be here with you. First of all, because we know how hard you work in the sector. It's always a privilege to work with you and also to share this kind of products that mainly aim to help and provide support to companies in the region to try to address this issue of losses. You know that this is a critical topic for Latin America and the Caribbean. The report was prepared with Raúl. This was published last year. It's basically the result of an effort that took several years, because when we started working on these electricity losses, we thought it was a need for the bank and for the distribution companies and even the ministries of energy and finance in the region, because they said they had this problem and they wanted us to try to help them. We had several proposals to try to address this issue of losses. But since it was a problem that was repeated in the different countries, and due to the stakeholders involved, we decided to prepare a report including the factors that are generating this situation. And through this diagnosis, we could help countries to define different actions or best practices to implement in order to manage electricity losses. And that is the objective of this report. This is organized in three big sections. In the first one is about diagnosis of electricity losses in the region. Then we have an analysis on which are the factors that are having an impact of these losses, and a third section that presents the best practices that can be implemented to reduce these losses. All this, of course, is based on the experience of the different countries and companies that have been successful in the implementation of reforms to then reduce the electricity losses in their countries or regions. Okay, so to begin with, then, so summing up, and this is just an overview, the analysis presented the type of losses that we are considering both in distribution and transmission, and our calculation for all these analyses at region level, it's very easy. That is the difference between available energy when we start the distribution phase minus the energy that was actually billed. That difference is called electricity losses. And these electricity losses, they have two different explanations. Some are technical and non-technical. Technical factors, and that can be connected to infrastructure or lack of infrastructure in some cases for a proper management of electricity, and another one that is not connected with those factors, but it is connected to losses during commercialization of that electricity. And there are several factors involved in this. What things can we see in the region? Something that Andres mentioned. The first thing that called our attention is the behavior of electricity losses at global level. For instance, what we did, it was a pretty simple approach. There was a lot of information that was complicated in a way. But basically, we wanted to compare from 99 up to 2019. We wanted to compare the behavior of electricity losses in Latin America and the Caribbean. And there in the figure, it's in yellow, compared to three big indicators, basically low-income countries, middle-income countries, and OECD countries. And unfortunately, we were surprised by the results. What we saw is that average, our region is above the loss average for these three indicators: OECD countries, low income, and middle income. Okay, and that is terrible. What we calculated with that estimate of losses in the region during this period is that this had a significant impact in the management of electricity companies and in general on the economy of all these countries. Also, what we saw is that if for the region we consider a parameter of losses of 10%, that is that line that you can see there in black, if we had losses of 10%, unfortunately, and we thought that was a reasonable number for the region, is that 85% of the countries had losses above that average of 10%. And especially in 2019, and that was mentioned by Andres, losses in the region were equivalent to all the things that we produce with solar and wind energies. And then we saw that the dimension of these losses in sub-regions in Latin America and the Caribbean. First, when it comes to sub-regions, there was a diversity of losses. We had regions that in the IDB were identified as Caribbean countries, losses of 15.2 average compared to losses of 18.1 for other countries in Central America, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Mexico. So within the Latin American region, the sub-region represented by these countries, Central America, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Mexico. And now we're going to go in more detail. If we look at the next slide, these are the average calculated. These are the indicators that we got for the analysis period and the level of losses that we had. And you can see here the different problems by countries. And there's a lot of dispersion throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. Some countries, like Haiti, they have losses of 60% compared to countries like Chile, Barbados, and Trinidad and Tobago with losses that are very, very low, below 10%. So these countries, when it comes to for the period, we have losses of 17% for the region, and any improvement below that number, of course, will represent additional income for the countries. And I would like to expand this in the next slide, please. When we started with the analysis of losses, the first big concern was the impact it had on the financial sustainability. But as we moved on in the analysis, we realized that there were other connotations, all of them very relevant, connected to this issue of management of electricity losses. And we identify these four. First, sustainability finance. So distribution companies are making less profit, of course, because these losses translated in very difficult processes, management processes for these companies. The other one is the quality of the infrastructure. This is a direct indicator for those countries with high percentage of losses, that as losses increased, the availability of resources for the company were decreasing, and as a consequence, they were running more and more behind. And as a consequence of that, the quality was also affected. And because of that, that generated management problems that could affect manufacturing countries and services throughout the country, and that would affect how competitive these countries could be. Another one is social equity. We saw that those that are the most affected and social groups, of course, is the low-income groups. So the most vulnerable populations are the most affected by the lower quality of electricity services because they had fewer options. And in some cases, it was very difficult for these populations to find other options when the quality of the service was affected. there was an analysis to define the size of the gap to represent the losses in the electricity sectors in Latin America. And what we saw, and that is what we try to reflect here, we compare the investment in Latin America and the Caribbean from 2015 to 2022. Each of the years is represented, and we compare that with the minimum requirements for infrastructure for that period of time in the electricity sector to keep that infrastructure at a level that would allow them to comply with the ODS, basically to keep the quality of the electricity service. And what we estimated that at annual level for the whole region, we could need $48 billion per year. That is 0.8 of the GDP in the region to guarantee electricity services in a reasonable way. Is this line that you can see there, almost in the middle of the graph. That would be the requirement for investments in the electricity sector every year to keep these infrastructure services at a reasonable level to provide high quality services. And we compare this with what was invested, and we saw that in 2015, 2016, and the rest in the year, the region was investing below that line. There was another analysis. What we wanted to see is what happens, what would be the additional resources in the region if losses were reduced from 17% to 12%, and what would happen if these were also reduced to 10%. That seems to be like a reasonable target for this. And what you can see in yellow, those are additional income that we could get if losses were reduced to 12%. Which could be these additional incomes if we reduce losses to 12%? And if those resources were used in the sector for investments, what would happen with those targets for the region? All the years we would be reaching the targets. If we thought, for instance, reducing losses up to 10%, additional income, you could be seen there in green. So what is the message? Well, if we address losses, energy losses, this would, of course, improve competitiveness, better solutions for the users, better service, reduce the gap, the impact on the most vulnerable. Those would be all the results. But what we saw that the resources that could be recovered by implementing actions to reduce losses could have very positive effects on investment to try to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, to conclude with my section here, and now Raul will continue with his presentation, I just want to tell you about this picture here. Here, what we have is an analysis, and it was carried out, conducted by Raul in an econometric analysis. We have this idea that there were several factors impacting the size of the losses. So we thought, why don't we have an econometric analysis to see whether those variables are significant for the treatment of electricity loss? And let's try to see if these are significant and what kind of actions can be implemented to reduce this. So we saw 5 big variables. First, electricity losses in the regions will increase as a consequence of external shocks. Increase in raw materials, increase in unemployment. Another factor, the one connected to company management, right? Electricity companies in general more specifically distribution companies, especially when it comes to commercial management, we ask ourselves how relevant it is that investment is private or public to define the impact that may have on the size of losses. And we got interesting results. Another one has to do with regulatory frameworks to define whether there were good regulatory frameworks or institutional framework and what kind of impact this would have on the size of the non-technical losses. So if the regulatory framework was negative or low quality in the service, well, that has a significant impact on the size of electricity losses. And the other one was connected to socio-economic characteristics. If we have low levels of income of users, the density of the populations, also culture when it comes to payment in some countries, that should be considered a relevant factor or not. So all those variables were analyzed, and we have here, where we have right next to each of the factors, we also try to find potential solutions, and these were connected to each of these points around the picture. So now, Raúl, the floor is yours if you want to continue. Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. So next slide, please. So as Ariel was saying, so it's a big problem. And what I want to mention here is that electricity loss in fact represent a vicious circle in the electricity markets. So it's not an isolated issue. It affects the whole system. And obviously it has a negative impact on the generation of energy. So we need to comply with the requirement of the demand, but companies are being affected in their income generation that limits the capacity for investment of the companies. And basically, their fee is what the companies have to recover the investment. And that generates a negative signal if they cannot do this, because that will affect future investment in the market. And the question here then, after this diagnosis, is what can we do about this? We need to solve the electricity losses issue. Because all stakeholders are affected by this, and users are affected by this. So there's a lot of benefits in solving this issue. What would be the magnitude order of a program of loss reduction? We had this analysis that is in the book, and we found out that without including all the benefits that we mentioned there, only considering income recovery for loss levels of 10% as a target, and only considering benefits of energy for the population, the investment return rate would be 12%. We found out that we can reduce the stress on the energy generation sector, like 100 terawatts per year. So it's a vicious circle. But if we address this issue, we'll have net positive results, okay, considering reasonable assumptions, being on the conservative side. So that is one of the messages that we wanted to transmit. Next slide, please. Just to make this visible of the potential benefits of addressing this issue of electricity losses is that when you address this issue, something that we observed is that, of course, that income is increased for companies, but also users also win because the service they get is better. Because if companies have better infrastructure, they get a better service. And there's a clear link that can be seen here. We have the correlation between the level of loss at distribution and SAIFI. So as we increase losses, lower levels in the quality of the service. So this is very important for users. We have studied that was connected to this publication that basically they asked consumers about their preferences. What would you have if you could? Not having regular connection or having the same service but even a low quality. And the answer is, I'd rather pay a reasonable pay for energy and improve quality of the service. So one of the social aspects of this reduction in electricity loss is to increase quality for users. So we should know that it's also a benefit for the users. I don't want to be redundant, but dealing with electricity loss is an important thing to do. The investment to address this issue is a challenge for all the companies in the region. In fact, we have estimated that to deploy a loss program that aims to reach a ratio of 10%, we could need something like $1 billion annually. To get that $1 billion is complicated, especially in markets where we cannot guarantee collecting the price of the energy delivered. So the deficit in investment is difficult to deal with. Also, this investment deficit of the infrastructure stock increases annually. There's a need to modernize, to improve and expand infrastructure. And together with promoting an investment plan is the fact that implementing a loss reduction program requires of a comprehensive strategy, and this comprehensive strategy requires for the harmonization of different stakeholders. So you need the support of the government. You need to have regulatory framework that support these loss reduction programs. And for that, you need a buy-in by the political counterparts so that they realize that this is positive for the government. Because if we solve the loss problem, we're going to reduce the tax burden. You're not going to be using public resources in this sector, but also you will guarantee a high quality service, and that will have a positive impact in the whole system. Next slide, please. These are some general conditions that we have found that are shared by all the loss reduction programs that have reached the objective set. Stable political environment, and that should be achieved through the dissemination of the benefits that these kind of programs would have. Of course, that this should be aligned with incentive programs. For instance, if you reach the target, the fee may be reduced. And of course, it requires better planning and deployment of technology in the modernization of the sector. Even though it may be challenging, we have specific cases that may be followed in order to reach successful results. Here we have several of them. I would like to highlight that these case studies took place in 1990 and before COVID. So the situation may have changed, but we would like to mention that these experiences, these successful experiences, vary a lot. And it's difficult to say that there's a silver bullet to solve the problem of energy losses. It's been challenging, but there are some elements, some shared factors between them. And the one that appears in all the cases of programs that have reached the objectives is basically the political support. The political support that basically provides stability, regulations, about quality. And this quality regulation may represent some incentives for companies to implement these energy reduction plans. All these programs have had some social program connected to them to guarantee affordability of the service. So you can recover losses. Services are more regular, but then we make sure that those most vulnerable have access to the service in an affordable way. Next slide, please. So, conclusions, I would like to highlight. This is a complex challenge, it's a multidimensional challenge that is not only connected to the action range of distribution companies. This is connected to many other factors. One of them is regulations. Another one is economic shocks. So we need to identify the social difficulty of deploying these kind of programs. And the energy sector, it's a sector that is important in Latin American politics. It's a very complex program, and evidence of this is that in the last 40, 50 years, the average energy losses have not improved. They are around 16, 17%. This is a significant issue, It takes a lot of economic resources, and someone is paying for this. The state is paying for this, users are paying for this, and competitiveness losses are also a consequence of this due to the low quality of the service. And lastly, then the electricity market does not attract any more investments. However, we see that there are successful cases that have reached reduction targets. In all cases, they need robust regulations, political support. We don't have one solution for all cases, but the report presents the challenge, these successful experiences, and it says that there are no other way of making progress in the modernization of the electricity markets if we don't solve and address this issue. Thank you. Thank you very much, both Daniel and Raúl, for this presentation, for this complete presentation. Of course, that the report is available to you all and it's worth reading. So thank you very much. So now let's move on to the second part. And for that, Rodrigo Palma, the floor is yours. Before that, Rodrigo Palma is a civil engineer. He's a magisters in the Universidad Católica de Chile. He's a doctor from the University of Dortmund in Germany. He's currently working as a director of FONDAP in Chile. He's also a professor in the University of Chile. He's also responsible for the Initiative of Energy Solutions. So, Rodrigo, you have the floor. You're in charge of the next panel. Okay, thank you very much, Fitzgerald. It's a pleasure to have you here today. Regards from the University of Chile and from the SEDA initiative, as you were saying. After this presentation by Ariel and Raúl, that was very interesting. So to continue along these lines, we have a panel with excellent speakers. So I will introduce the speakers for today. We have Giovanni Salazar, that has a degree in the San Carlos University in Guatemala. He works in strategic management by the Mesoamericana University, working in different plans of design and implementation. And from 2000, he's been in charge of different roles for the development of smart metering, the creation of the metering laboratory, and the plan for the control of losses in Guatemala. He's currently the chief of the Department of Losses and Meters in Guatemala. Thank you very much, Giovanni, for being here. We also have from Guatemala, Jaime Mercar. He's an engineer in the Energy Laws Department. He has a master's degree in industrial management and a postgraduate course in the analysis and data measuring. He's a project manager in the management of energy losses and fraud detection in electricity. Thank you, Jaime, for being here. From Costa Rica, we have Manuel Barbosa. He's an engineer. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Costa Rica. He knows about connected to topics of lighting, conditioning, and other activities, also as comprehensive management at several different levels. He also has an experience in distribution systems. He started in the Electricity Institute in Costa Rica. He has worked in energy conservation up to 2019, where he was leading the management department for energy losses in the distribution chain. So thank you, Manuel, for being here. As you can see, all the speakers are very well connected to all these topics. Then we have Germán Noes from Edenor, Argentina. He's an engineer from the Technological University in Argentina. He has an MBA in engineering management, and he's got 17 years of experience in the electricity sector in Argentina, working in Edenor. So thank you very much, Germán, for being here. We have a representative of Enel in Brazil, Aldo Pesaña. He's a production engineering, and he's been working in the distribution sector for 20 years. He contributed with his opinion to the main exchanges regarding the model of energy contracting, the cost models for operations, regulatory improvements for the implementation of response mechanisms for demand, smart metering, defining guidelines for decision making. Currently, Aldo is the chief of strategies in Enel Brazil, and he's the president of electricity distribution at Delats. So thank you very much, Aldo, for being here. We know that you have just arrived from the airport. And then as a panelist, we have Ariel Ramirez. Ariel Ramirez is the market coordinator in Edesur from Dominican Republic. He's a system engineering. He has more than 21 years of experience in the electricity sectors in Dominican Republic. He's leading different analysis of the markets and the condition of the electricity markets in the country. He also has specialized training in electricity markets, energy planning, and risk management in processes, in energy processes. He was involved in different activities connected to the economic impact and regulations in the national electricity markets. He has a deep understanding of the electricity markets at the national level. As you can see, we have very, very distinguished speakers. So we have 54 minutes, and then we're going to be closing the event. So the idea is to make the most of this time. The idea with the organizers, we have defined a set of questions that are connected to the IDB studies. Maybe you can share your opinions, and then we're going to have some cross-cutting questions. And then if time allows, we can answer questions from the attendees of the conference. Okay, let's see. So without further ado, then let's discuss this topic from the Guatemala standpoint. And it says, recently there had been applications connected to data and machine learning for the detection and the reduction of energy losses. EXA has implemented solutions of this type that is innovative as part of the project called Energizados with the support of IDB. Could you tell us about this model and what kind of result have you obtained in fraud detection? That is our first question that Giovanni and Jaime can answer. Good morning, everyone. First of all, we would like to provide some context to answer this question. The loss reduction program in Guatemala is 25 years is 25 years old. Together with the program, we include in this energy loss program, we include investment and actions on the ground that in a way can allow us to control and reduce losses. Taking this into account, one of the main components was the inspection plan. Basically, by doing this, when it comes to information sources, is basically people on the ground analysis of the different areas, like billing or different reports and other type of information that we would receive as part of the analysis. When we checked all these sources of information, we needed to address this topic, and there was a lot of manual work to do that was required to implement these actions. So basically, we started adding to our commercial management system, we started populating our database with different pieces of knowledge. What is the point with all this? Is that the database, in a way, started getting better at having all this information about the types of frauds, the type of clients, the type of economic activities. And there was a lot of information connected to energy losses. So we included all this in our knowledge database. And as from that point, we started dreaming with the idea of having other tools, analytical tools, based on machine learning and neural networks that would allow us to identify frauds. Because the models developed us from that information allowed us to increase agility in a way and to cover all our customers in the company and to quickly analyze them all using these tools. Tools that we could use thanks to our project with the ITB. Now we have more than one model. Now, Jaime, we continue with this. Jaime has been the architect of all this. He has worked with IGB and with other providers, infrastructure providers, to try to include all these analytical models that allows us to deal with the loss indexes in Guatemala. Jaime, the floor is yours. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to share the experience. Thanks to the support of the IGB, we developed a model using AI. Clearly, we can see. I would like to mention that we coexist with AI. Here we have an image that was created with AI, of course. Here you can see the source. Now this is here to stay, right? John McCarthy in 56, they tried to define this term of AI, artificial intelligence. And what they wanted to do at the time was to create a machine that could think like a human being. So we have always coexisted with artificial intelligence. Now we have several applications that can help us to make certain decisions, or they suggest certain course of actions depending our consumption patterns. So basically, what we do is, together with the IDB provided support to what we were already doing, and they provided a technological tool that helps us to predict fraud. Well, in the past, before these tools, we had some information sources that came from different units from the company, like the billing department or customer care unit. So those departments provided information, and we analyzed certain variables to try to define whether a client was making fraud or not, like consumption, geographical area, trying to connect some economic activities that may be connected in a way to fraud. So all these to try to predict fraud. This is what we would do in the past. Now, thanks to the tool, all these got more powerful. So basically, we generated a route, an inspection route. And basically, what we want to do is that the readings of the meters are correct. And in some cases that the meter is not working properly, or we need to make some changes or repairs to the meters, but also we're looking for fraud. So as Salazar mentioned here, we have all that information since 2004, but we needed to have another structure, another information structure, so that we could better use that information. So basically, IDB helps us to create this model. The modeling process, basically, this is just a simple version. Okay, this requires to have experts, data engineers, or data scientists to basically cover that process of getting the information, to analyze characteristics, to train the model. I'm not going to go any deeper in this because it's very complex, but basically, once you create the model, we had a platform where we could run a model. That model was created through a Mexican company called OpenRoad, and they have an environment where you have the model and the information sources that includes billing, network issues, all that is included, and it runs into an environment of Linux servers. And basically what the model does is to calculate the probability of fraud. And once they calculate the probability of fraud, it goes through a decision tree, and that decision tree can be set up according to our idea of the business or our needs. For instance, to giving priority to those that can be recovered, or those that maybe it is the equipment that is failing and it's not fraud. So after the decision tree, we get some reports that can be sent to the different units to go and work in the ground to verify, check, and to enforce, basically, or to repair or maintain the meters when it's needed. This is a very clear image. So we have data processing at the beginning. We also have the calculation for the models and the probability of fraud. Of course, we have a neuronal model that is adjusted, and then we add the IDB model. This IDB works together with the adjusted model, and those values, they have a final score that goes through the evaluation tree, and that is set up according to our needs, to our operational capacity that we have for those interventions in the ground. After that, then we have some reports, and these reports will be in certain order, so then that we can manage or carry out these inspections on the ground. Some of the indicators, even though we can see we are dealing with assertivity here, the number of anomalies compared to the number of inspections. Looking for anomalies, what you can see here is in blue. This is the graph before implementing the first tool, that was mid-2022. Here, when it was done manually, and here, the second part was using the support of the tool. It's worth mentioning, even though that we've had some varieties, so later we're going to have some time to round up. Okay, so try to sum up this assertiveness graph, because we're running out of time. Okay, so I can show you the other graph that is pretty interesting, where we see that in blue, this is the manual work. And by using the tool, the results in green. Here we are measuring the amount of energy that we can get for the anomaly. With the tool, we are calculating. We get more energy with fewer inspections. So in conclusion, the tool has been very, very useful to us. And that is highlighted here in our loss index. As you can see, it's very low. It's a very good index. So basically, the tool helped us to discover where the fraud is taking place. The tool allows us to analyze all our clients, more than 1.5 million clients. So basically, it's been very, very useful to us. And thank you very much for the opportunity. So, Rodrigo, summing up, we are getting more with less. So, less resources on the ground, lower cost in inspection, but we're getting better results. Thank you very much, Giovanni and Jaime. It was very, very clear. That is a very powerful example, no doubt about it. So now let's stay in Central America, and let's see a question by Costa Rica. The IDB study mentions the existence of loss levels pretty high in sectors with public participation. However, Costa Rica has reached loss levels close to 11% that are very low in the regional context. In the case of ICE, which has been the role of governance, incentives, and management programs of a public company to get these results? Well, good morning, everyone. Regarding that question, even though losses are below 11%, the elements that have contributed to this are from the regulatory standpoint. We know, we are aware of certain value of electricity losses up to a limit. And the limits is very easy to calculate. Basically, the average value of the values recorded by each of the 7 distribution companies in the country. We have 7 distribution companies, and they are public. Some are cooperatives, others are municipal, and of course, some belong to the state. And the thing is that each of them, depending on their area of action, either they're rural or urban, they have different loss indicators that will contribute to improve those decisions. Why? Because as distribution companies, they will have to reduce the loss indicator depending on what they are doing. First of all, as electricity companies, we need to know where our work is being focused on. Everybody knows that there are technical and non-technical losses, but that has an impact in different areas depending on the country. We need to know our limits, and it's very important what you mentioned. The impact on the fees during the years, this has been below 9%. And as each company improves, the indicator makes us be competitive with the others. And we need to improve so that we don't get any financial losses, right? So from the standpoint of our company, each percentile point that we have represents $8 million. We have been working on this. Here we have 8.05% in losses. That represents $64 million for 2024. We know that we works, and something that is very important is regulations. From the point of view of fees, we know that we can make improvements, or we can produce incentives for improvements in this area. So we need to improve the quality of the service provided to our clients. So we can work on the network, compensation of the network, things that can be implemented to improve the quality of the service. And thanks to that, we can reduce losses. Something else is there inspections to be carried out in the short, middle, and long term. And the approach is basically to see which are the main points for losses. We have an initial analysis to see where to focus on. We need to have clear data, clear information about which are the main points to cover. We have 4 regions, and we need to know that each area, they show differences aspects, whether they are on the coast, if it is urban, rural. So because of that, we're going to have a value for the behavior of losses. Also connected to culture of the population and the impact that this can have, or the impact of poverty on all this. Of course, we should not forget, and something that is important, is that recovery of income and profit. And that is something important. Management of income is important, because loss management, at the end of the day, you need to recover that energy. And if you have a client that is showing some irregularities, regulations are pretty clear. And it says that we need to go and recover that energy that was not billed. And we need to charge the client the associated costs to the inspection, to the correction, damage to the meters. And that generates little by little an incentive, well, or some awareness for the users so that they know that energy should be paid for. Also, that generates like a fine if you don't pay for the service. And in some cases, these fines are applied to the users that do not pay it. Also, management of measurement is important, calibration of the equipment. We have routine inspection of our larger clients, and our colleagues of Guatemala told us about high consumption clients. Those meters should be in perfect conditions. All elements should be very well calibrated. We need to check that calibration of meters are the appropriate ones. And if there are other devices with higher levels of accuracy, then we need to replace the old ones with the new equipment. The approach here is where to work with this. As you can see, we need to improve this and work with all the factors at the same time. We can talk about different components, but those projects are analyzed and we define the different terms of operation. We have low investment here, but we need not to forget about other investment, infrastructure and technological improvements to the system. We need to take into account that everything connected to energy reduction plan has a main objective, that is, it will have a direct impact on the financial components, and they will also have an impact on the electricity bill for the customers. So remember that distribution companies here are always focused on the lowest possible cost for the users. So the model has always been like this. We have some regulations connected to this, and also the improvement of the companies regarding implementation. We know that in these situations that have a negative impact, for instance, in some cases, losses were increased. For example, during the pandemic, we had an increase in losses. Unemployment affected the whole population. So during the pandemic, obviously, sales went down, losses increased. There was an increase of 3% of losses. So those are elements that can have a negative impact on us. But of course, that we try to compensate for those things. Thank you very much, Manuel. Of course, that there's no silver bullet to all these processes that have so many different causes. But I think that this case may be of help to other members. You know that in the question and answer button, we have different questions that you can, so feel free to answer them so we can do everything at the same time. Okay. So you can click there and start answering questions. So now let's move on and go to the southern part. Edenor from Argentina operates in the metropolitan area of Buenos Aires. And in 20 COVID-19 losses reach almost 20%. To mitigate this, you have developed a regularization program for clandestine users together with smart meters, which have been the results of all this strategy. Germán. Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Adelard, for the invitation. Thank you, Rodrigo. Let me see if I can share screen. Okay, can you see it there? Yeah, please go to full screen. Yeah. Okay, great. So I will be telling you a little bit about Edenor in numbers. The concession area is 4,637 square kilometers. We have 3.3 million clients, energy sold of 23,000 giga. Our market share in Argentina is approximately 20%. So probably we are the largest distribution company in Argentina. We are divided in 3 different regions. We have 10 operational areas, and for us, that is also an additional challenge when it comes to planning of task and our work with inactive and clandestine clients. Since in 2019, we started with the installation of self-administer meters. Why self-administer? Because Edenor, when we started working with the interventions, we deliver this with a 300 kilowatts, so the clients can administer this, they can recharge that energy as they use it. So these meters that we used, that we told you about, they have 2 different units and a keyboard that stays with the client where they can recharge and the consumption data. We know that an image is worth 100 words. These meters here are placed in different installations. In the first one is in this pole, is called Molcon network. Molcon because it's multiple connections. We have these units here that are far away from the clients, so they cannot be tampered with. And as from there, you have different connections to the clients. Another one is these kind of connections that we can see in the picture. That is for clients with high, we don't want them to tamper with the meters. So imagine that the meter is now far away from the post. So it's even harder to have access to the meters. Another strategy that we follow, where basically is this last image here. As we find these clandestine customers, we leave new meters for them to use. To get more information from the meter, in the transformation centers where we have a concentration above 50 clients with this type of technology, we place this that is called a concentrator. This has a communication with the meters, and through a GPRS communication, we get more data, daily consumption, another type of data that allows us to have a better monitoring of the situation. Also, when we can detect when clients are involved in fraud. Some other benefits that we got from these kind of meters is that clients may follow their consumption, and they have different alerts when they are running out of charge as they administer their consumption. Apart from having a safe installation, we have all the protection devices for these kind of installations. And we work with 2 foundations where we provide training. To the clients so that they have a rational use of energy. We want them to use what they can pay for. So thanks to these strategies implemented with the neighbors, we want them to stay in the system. Also, this kind of technology, they can get benefits if they are part of the banking system. So those are additional benefits that we provide our clients with. And we do this through alliances with different companies. Since 2019, we started in 200,000 meters in 2019. It's important to highlight that in 2019, 100,000, half of them were installed in 2019. It was an aggressive plan. We increased the number, then we changed the strategy. As from 2021, we focus more on sustainability. And now, by the end of 2024, we reach 244,000 clients. So what were the results with these installations? At first, you can see it was pretty aggressive, and our resources were concentrated on installation. And even though we were working on the recidivism of our clients, we were not getting the right results. Once we changed the strategy in 2021, we concentrated more on sustainability, and look how results improved in the number of gigawatts sold. In 2022, this was a very warm year, and you know our customers are very sensitive to low temperatures. 2022 was a pretty warm year, and that had a negative impact. 2023 was our best year, and in 2024, because we know that this segment is very sensitive to price, there was an increase in the price of energy, and that had a negative impact that can be seen in the graph. Having said all this, in 2019, we had our peak. This is December 2019, and the peak was in June. June, it was 20.20. And then, thanks to these installations, remember that at the beginning we focused on installation of these kind of meters, and then as we moved on and passed on to focus on sustainability, the loss rates started going down, and as from that point, we reach a very good figure of 14.87. And last year, because of the effect of price, there was a decrease on demand and the losses increased, but we lost fewer gigas that compared to the previous year, 2023. So the conclusions of all these that I have shared with you, basically, and we can monitor the different aspects of consumption of our clients. Well, basically what we could do is, now we have new clients that in the past were inactive or clandestine. We could better monitor consumption through the concentrators to assess the behavior. We increased customer loyalty, and it's very important to work with these foundations and training to users, because we have very high rates of permanence in the system. That was very important. That was an action that was very helpful to us. And with all this program and this strategy of meters installation, and also the strategy of focusing on sustainability, we were able to reduce losses. Today, they represent is 2.5 points, and the percentage of sales is 87%. So these clients are buying energy, and we have a maximum peak in 2023 of 89%. Thank you very much, Herman. It's very interesting to learn more about the application. There are some questions that were asked, so you can answer those questions. So we are running out of time, and it's a pleasure now to be able to go back to Brazil. And there's a question here to Aldo. Enel has developed initiatives to fight energy theft, and this is very complex. Especially there's an anti-theft project that combine technology measures, social and operational measures. So can you tell us more about these measures and which were the results of all this? Thank you. I will speak in Portuguese. I think this is going to be better. I think that you need to press the full presentation mode. Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. This is a picture of Enel Rio that works in Rio de Janeiro with 70% of the surface of the state. We have a part that is covered by lights with 3 million clients with a population of 7 million people. That corresponds to 66 municipalities. I wanted to make a comment about this, is that the non-technical loss percentage is connected to how Enel work with non-technical losses. We have the market build in low tension. We can see here that as from 2013, there's an increase in losses. That explains, in a way, what explains this increase is we're talking about areas with severe operational restrictions. These are risk areas. These areas could be regions in which different armed groups, criminal groups, and criminal gangs control circulation and access to the areas, and also to public services in the area. That limits the operation of distribution companies. We have restrictions to get in and to operate in these regions. That is a serious problem in Rio de Janeiro. And of course, this has an impact on several concessions in the country. Because of this, we finished 2023 with non-technical losses of 35, almost 36% of the market. And we also have a recognized coverage of 22%. What we did in the period between 2018 and 2013, we have an economic loss. We have losses that reach 1.8 billion reais. That is a significant amount, clearly, that ends up having a terrible impact on the local markets. This has an impact. I can compare average losses in Brazil, considering the whole country. That is between 15 and 16 percentage points. But in Rio de Janeiro, we almost doubled those numbers. There's a lot of losses, and that shows the complexity of these states and the increasing presence of these areas in which we cannot have access to. There are risks to our staff. We can see that as from 2013, there's an increase in the number of these restricted areas. So we have the build market, and several actors started talking about the distribution. This was reduced, and now we have a clear increase in numbers. I'm talking about the increase in the number of these areas, and as I told you, the number of clients that increased in more than 50%. We have an increase of 538 increase in the number of clients that are located in these risk areas. As I told you, these are the risk areas in which we cannot operate due to security concerns. And almost 60% of losses in Rio de Janeiro take place in this area, which we have no access to. So any action to be implemented there is out of the question. It's impossible to access or to get into these areas. We are talking about losses in these areas. This phenomenon is 6 times larger than in other areas. This is what I told you about. We have losses of 35.7%, with almost 60% of participation in risk areas. And 17% of consumers are located in these areas, but most of the losses are here. Here, I wanted to show you some examples. Here we have 2 examples of violence against our staff. It's violence or threats to our staff. Basically, they are trying to work in these areas. We carried out some investigations and some research work with the Universidad Federal Fluminense, and we carried out some studies and we interviewed the employees, and 71% of them in these areas mentioned that they were victims of violence when trying to regularize the process. We have these 2 examples from 2024. A staff member was identified, and a person that sent them a message through social network, Instagram, threatening them that he had been identified and he wanted to talk to him. It's a very complex situation and very difficult to deal with. There's also a video. I'm not going to show you that, but there's an employee that is carrying out a regularization activity, and when he goes down the stairs, he is attacked.
Max.
So obviously, public authority is not present in these areas. So employees in this case are maybe under attack, so it's very dangerous for them. This is something different. We always had vulnerable communities and in some cases difficulties, but what happens today, that is something completely new to us. There are some gang criminal groups that are in control of the territory. Okay, they own the region. They own the region and the services provided. Within this context in Rio in the last years, we decided to measure and try to define the size of this problem. For this, we created a criteria for the inclusion of areas. Here we define the different risk areas, and these are the criteria that we defined. So basically, what we did is we considered the last 3 months and we assessed whether there was at least 50% of the services cancelled because of violence issues. Also, we assess all the news connected to criminal activities in the last 90 days. We analyze social media. So if we have at least 2 of these 4 criteria, if we checked 2 at least in the last 4, if we have 2 of the 4, the region will be considered a risk area and service in that area will be suspended. So this is what we can do to protect our employees. We also monthly we assess the maintenance of these areas. So we see whether there are improvements, we see whether the police can have access to this area so that we can return to these areas and take out the necessary actions. Once that an area is classified as a risk area, then we set up a measurement project. By doing this, we can isolate only that area and to analyze the loss, the specific loss in that area. By doing this, we can see that we can, even though we cannot get in, at least we can see and measure the impact that losses have in that area. With that, we can go and talk to the authorities, talk to the regulatory bodies to show them the loss, the very high loss that takes place in that region and how limited we are to operate. We talk about this with light so that we can have some shared information. And this is a problem in the exchanges we have with regulators because information is provided by the regulators. What we want to do is to get external information, but it is very, very hard. It is very hard to reach a shared source of information accepted by all the parties. That is the problem that we have with the risk areas. We have no solution for this so far. We are trying to find ways of dealing with this topic together with the regulators. As you probably know, several distribution companies in Brazil are terminating their contracts. And renovation for 30 years is being discussed. That is the situation in Rio de Janeiro. By the end of 2026, the contract will be over, and in this new concession contract, they included several clauses to try to address this issue. However, we still need to have specific regulations connected to this. But they are talking about the possibility of having lower fees so that people can have the possibility of having access to these services, and also the possibility of having a loss plan. So we could present this plan, then we would need the approval, and then companies will be able to act within the contract, but we have not regulated this yet. Okay, can you please wrap up? We're running out of time. Okay. I would like to tell you about the actions to be implemented. We have several. We have specific values. In 2024, we were able to work on 30,000 network components, but we have a lot of recidivism in this case. In some cases, we have clandestine actions. We removed 500 kilometers from the network, and in 2025, we are going to start with the program called BT0. It's something similar to Argentina, so that we can have to implement some measures to have meters on poles and not in the houses. And by doing this, we're going to be able to reduce recidivism. We will be able to increment and increase the use of AI. So we are thinking about different specific actions to be implemented to try to reduce the loss. There are several actions, including the replacement of equipment to try to reach the population, to try to improve the economic factors so that we can make progress, trying to include all these customers in our service. Those were the main topics I wanted to tell you about. That is very interesting, and it covers several dimensions. And as you know, when we have these meetings, we always run out of time. So we would like to wrap up now. Going back to Central America, the Dominican Republic has one of the highest rates of loss in the region, but they were able to reduce these losses in 6 percentage points through different programs to improve substations and distribution networks in urban context. Can we say that there's a positive connection between the quality of service and the willingness to pay by users? Can you tell us a little bit more about this? I think that Aldo is still with the mic on. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I would like to provide some context to our participation. Can you hear me? Yeah, perfect, you're right. We cannot see you, but we can hear you. Sorry, I can't find the right icon to activate the camera. Okay, don't worry. Let's pretend you're talking to us from the skies. I was taking some master's degree on regulation and in public policies connected to the electricity market. And I can tell you that I do believe there's a positive relationship when the quality of the service increases, when the service is continuously improving. We do see an impact, a positive impact on the willingness of the users to pay for the service. And this is because really clients are grateful for the service, the levels of trust increase. so customers pay on time, and all those things can be reflected. We know that most of the countries that here we have different relationships, different realities. For instance, as Raul mentioned, we do not have a silver bullet for all this. And it is always connected to the political willingness that we may have in our countries. This also has an impact on social programs. We had a presentation connected to all this. That's why we are here. Connected to non-technical losses. If you have any questions, please let us know. Okay, questions will be posted in the Q&A session. Thank you very much for being brief. Because now we're late by 4 minutes. So thank you very much for being so generous and summarizing your presentation. You will see all the questions in the icon of Q&A. I don't know if you want to share some closing remarks, but I don't know, Fitzgerald, maybe you can close the event. I would like to thank you, everyone, for sharing all these experiences in all these years. This has been a very fruitful session. There's no doubt about that. I took notes of all this so that I can use all this information. So that we can reduce the non-technical losses in the different companies. We are working on that. Okay, perfect. Yeah, you were right. We are all connected to all these ideas. So Fitzgerald, back to you. Thank you for moderating all this. Okay, Rodrigo, well, thank you very much for your work as a moderator. I would like to thank all the speakers, all the attendees and participants. In fact, we have a lot of questions. I feel that we ran out of time. We could have spent way more time. I think that shows clearly the interest there is about this topic. I got the impression that several of the topics that we dealt with can be expanded a little bit more. So then we have homework. So both in ADELAT and OLADE, we're going to keep promoting these kind of exchanges. We believe that this has been very fruitful, these 2 hours we spent together. So let's make progress together in this area. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you all here today. OLADE, we are at your disposal and open to new meetings like this one. Alessandro, the floor is yours to close the event. Thank you very much, everyone, to all the participants, speakers that shared their experiences. We believe that this is just the beginning of this relationship. So we're going to be sharing all the material, all the answers to your questions, and we will continue working together in this topic that is so relevant. Thank you once again, and see you next time. Bye-bye.